November 24th, 1971. Thanksgiving Eve. A man in a business suit walks up to the Northwest Orient Airlines counter at Portland International Airport and he pays cash $20 for a one-way ticket to Seattle. The flight will take 30 minutes. He gives his name as Dan Cooper. No one asks for identification. In 1971, you didn't need it. 30 minutes later, that man will become the only hijacker in American aviation history to successfully escape and never be caught. He will extort $200,000 equivalent to $1.6 million today. He will demand 4 parachutes. He will release all 36 passengers unharmed in Seattle, and then, somewhere over the forests of southwest Washington, he will open the rear stairway of a Boeing 727, step into the night sky at 10,000 feet, and vanish. For 53 years, his identity has remained unknown. For 53 years, investigators have asked, did he survive? In 1980, a boy found $5,800 of the ransom money buried along the Columbia River. It was the only physical evidence ever recovered until 2023. In 2023, the children of the FBI's prime suspect came forward with a parachute and the logbook. The FBI, which had officially closed the case in 2016, reopened the investigation. The question is no longer theoretical. DNA testing is underway. The man who called himself D.B. Cooper may finally be identified. This is the complete story: the hijacking, the jump, the investigation, the evidence for survival and the evidence for death, the suspects, and the breakthrough that might, after 53 years, solve America's greatest aviation mystery. It's 2:50 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Northwest Orient Flight 305 departs Portland International Airport, bound for Seattle-Tacoma Airport, a routine 30-minute flight. The Boeing 727 carries 36 passengers and a crew of 6. Among the passengers, a middle-aged man in seat 18C. Witnesses later describe him as white, mid-40s, about 6 feet tall, 170 to 180 pounds, dark hair, brown eyes, wearing a black business suit, white shirt, narrow black tie, and a black raincoat. He carries a brown briefcase. He orders a bourbon and soda. He lights a cigarette. He appears calm. Shortly after 3 o'clock, he hands a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. Schaffner assumes it's a phone number passengers occasionally try to flirt with stewardesses. She puts the note in her pocket without reading it. The man leans toward her and says quietly, "Miss, you better look at that note. I have a bomb." Schaffner reads the note. It says, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me. You are being hijacked." The man opens his briefcase slightly. Inside, Schaffner sees red cylinders, wires, and a large battery. It looks like a bomb. She sits down. The man is polite. He speaks quietly, so other passengers can't hear. He hands her a second note, neatly typed. It lists his demands: $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes. When the plane lands in Seattle, refuel the aircraft, release the passengers, then fly to Mexico City. Schaffner takes the note to the cockpit. Captain William Scott contacts Seattle Air Traffic Control. The FBI is immediately notified. The plane circles above Seattle while the ransom is prepared. Northwest Orient scrambles to gather $200,000 in $20 bills, 10,000 bills. The bank records every serial number. The bills are packed into a canvas bag. The weight, 21 pounds. The parachutes prove more complicated. The hijacker specified 4 parachutes, 2 primary chutes and 2 reserve chutes. Why 4? Investigators later theorized that he wanted authorities to believe he might take a hostage, which meant they couldn't sabotage the parachutes without risking an innocent life. Earl Cossey, a local skydiving instructor, provides the parachutes. 3 are standard sport parachutes. The 4th, a reserve chute, is a modified military N-by-8 EAT-8 parachute. Cossey had customized it himself, moved the ripcord from left to right, enlarged the pack tray, added D-rings. It's unique. 1 in a billion, Cossey later said. At 5:24 p.m., nearly 3 hours after the hijacking began, Flight 305 lands in Seattle. An airline operations manager approaches the plane and delivers the money and parachutes. Cooper inspects them. He releases all 36 passengers. He keeps the pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, and 2 flight attendants, Florence Schaffner and Tina Mucklow. Cooper's instructions are specific. Fly to Mexico City. Set the airspeed at 170 knots, just above the 727's minimum safe speed. Fly at 10,000 feet lower than normal cruising altitude. Configure the wing flaps at 15 degrees. Leave the landing gear down. Keep the rear air stair unlocked. The crew objects. Flying that slow, that low, with flaps and gear down, will burn fuel rapidly. They'll never reach Mexico City. Cooper adjusts. Refuel in Reno, Nevada. Then continue to Mexico City. At 7:40 p.m, Flight 305 takes off from Seattle. Cooper orders everyone into the cockpit. He tells flight attendant Tina Mucklow to join the crew and close the curtain between first class and the cabin. She's the last person to see him. Alone in the cabin, Cooper ties the bag of money closed using cord from one of the parachutes. He puts on a parachute. He removes his tie and clip. At some point the crew can't be sure when he lowers the rear air stair. At 8 p.m, a warning light illuminates in the cockpit. The rear air stair is open. The crew feels a sudden change in air pressure. Captain Scott calls Cooper on the intercom. No answer. The plane continues south toward Reno. At approximately 8:13 p.m, the crew feels an upward movement of the tail consistent with a person stepping off the rear stairs. When the plane lands in Reno at 10:15 p.m, Cooper is gone. The rear air stair is extended. 2 parachutes remain in the cabin, 1 primary, 1 reserve. His tie and tie clip are on a seat. Cooper jumped somewhere over southwest Washington, likely near the Lewis River, east of Interstate 5. He jumped with $200,000 and 2 parachutes into a heavily forested wilderness area. It was dark, it was raining. The temperature was around 41 degrees Fahrenheit, and he was never seen again. The FBI launched one of the most extensive investigations in its history. They called it NORJAK, Northwest Hijacking. Within hours, agents were on the ground in southwest Washington searching the forests where Cooper likely landed. They interviewed hundreds of witnesses. They tracked down every person who bought a ticket on Northwest Orient that week. They followed thousands of leads across the country. Over the next 5 years, the FBI considered more than 800 suspects. Almost all were eliminated. By the late 1970s, only 2 dozen remained on the list. The physical evidence was limited. Asterisk the tie and tie clip. Cooper left them on the plane. DNA was later extracted from the tie skin cells, possibly saliva, but DNA databases were decades away in 1971. The tie is a cheap clip-on, sold at J.C. Penney. The tie clip is mother of pearl. Neither is distinctive enough to trace. Ask the money. Ask all 10,000 $20 bills have recorded serial numbers. The FBI distributed the list to banks nationwide. If Cooper tried to spend the money, he'd be caught. Except, no one ever tried to spend it. Not a single bill from the Cooper ransom has ever appeared in circulation. Not one. The parachutes. Cooper jumped with 2 parachutes, the modified military NBT-8 and the primary chute. He left behind 1 primary and 1 reserve. Crucially, the reserve he left behind was sewn shut, was a training parachute, unusable for an actual jump. Cooper either didn't notice or didn't care. This suggested he wasn't an experienced skydiver. The jump zone. Ask, based on the flight path, airspeed, and the moment the crew felt the tail rise, the FBI calculated Cooper jumped near Ariel, Washington, in a rugged, heavily forested area along the Lewis River. Ground searches found nothing. Aerial searches found nothing. No parachute, no body, no money. For 9 years there was no breakthrough. Then came February 10, 1980. 8-year-old Brian Ingram was camping with his family along the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington, about 20 miles downstream from the suspected jump zone. While smoothing sand for a campfire, Brian uncovered 3 bundles of rotting $20 bills, still held together by rubber bands. The bills were deteriorated, some described as the size of business cards, blackened, nearly unreadable, but enough serial numbers were legible. The FBI confirmed they matched the Cooper ransom, 2 bundles of 100 bills each, and 1 bundle of 90 bills, 5,800 total. This was the first physical evidence since the hijacking. It raised as many questions as it answered. How did the money get there? Did Cooper crash nearby and the money wash downstream? Did he survive but lose the bag during the jump? Did he bury it intentionally? Geological analysis complicated the picture. Scientists determined that the bills were deposited at Tina Bar, the discovery sites, after 1974. When the Army Corps of Engineers dredged a nearby section of the river, the money hadn't been there since 1971. It arrived later. But how? In 2020, amateur scientist Tom Kaye analysed the bills under a microscope and found diatoms, microscopic algae. The diatoms only bloom in spring, and the bills had only one season's worth of diatoms. This meant the money couldn't have gone into the water in November 1971. It went in years later, probably between 1974 and 1979, and only stayed in the water for a few months before washing up. This evidence suggests Cooper didn't land in the Columbia River. If he had, the money would show years of water exposure with diatoms from multiple seasons. Instead, the bills show minimal water exposure, and they arrived at Tina Bar after 1974. So where was the money between 1971 and 1974? No one knows. The FBI investigation continued for decades, but leads dried up. Witness memories faded. Technology improved, but there was no physical evidence to test. In July 2016, the FBI officially closed the case, stating, "Although the FBI will no longer actively investigate this case, should specific physical evidence emerge related specifically to the parachutes or the money taken by the hijacker, individuals with those materials are asked to contact their local FBI field office." For 45 years, the FBI's conclusion was clear. DB. Cooper probably died in the jump. The conditions were too dangerous. The parachute couldn't be steered. He jumped at night into dense forest in unsuitable clothing, a business suit, dress shoes. He had no survival gear. Even an experienced paratrooper would struggle. And Cooper showed signs of being an amateur. He didn't notice the reserve parachute was sewn shut, but in 2023, something changed. The FBI received exactly what they'd asked for: specific physical evidence related to the parachutes. From the beginning, one suspect stood out: Richard Floyd McCoy II. On April 7, 1972, just 5 months after the Cooper hijacking, McCoy boarded United Airlines Flight 855 in Denver, bound for Los Angeles. He hijacked the plane using an almost identical method. He showed the flight attendant what appeared to be a hand grenade. He demanded $500,000 and 4 parachutes. After the plane landed in San Francisco to pick up the ransom, McCoy ordered it back into the air. Over Provo, Utah, he jumped from the rear stairs with the money. Unlike Cooper, McCoy was caught. Within 72 hours, the FBI arrested him. His fingerprints were on a magazine left on the plane. Witnesses identified him. The ransom money was found at his home. McCoy was convicted and sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. McCoy seemed like the perfect suspect for the Cooper hijacking. He was a decorated Vietnam War veteran. He served 2 tours, first as a demolitions expert, then as a helicopter pilot with the Green Berets. He was an experienced skydiver. He had military parachute training, and he'd proven he could successfully hijack a plane and parachute away. But the FBI eliminated him. Why? The official reasons. Physical description. Witnesses described Cooper as mid-40s with brown eyes. McCoy was 29 in 1971 with blue eyes. He didn't match. Alibi. McCoy's family said he was home in Utah for Thanksgiving dinner on November 25, 1971, the day after the hijacking. Behavior. Cooper drank bourbon and smoked cigarettes on the plane. McCoy didn't drink or smoke. He was a devout Mormon. For decades, McCoy remained on the suspect list, but investigators believe the evidence ruled him out. Then came 2020. Karen McCoy Richards' widow died in July 2020. Shortly after, McCoy's 2 children, Shante and Richard III, Rick, contacted Dan Gryder, a retired airline pilot and skydiver who had spent 20 years investigating the Cooper case. The children had a secret. They believed their father was D.B. Cooper, and they'd been protecting their mother, whom they believed was complicit in both hijackings. In July 2022, Gryder visited the McCoy family property in Cove City, North Carolina. In an outbuilding on the property, he found a parachute rig and harness packed in a crate. It was a modified military N-Body 8 parachute, the exact type Earl Cossey had provided to Cooper. More than that, it had the specific modifications Cossie had described. The ripcord moved from left to right, enlarged pack tray, added D-rings, cut straps. Gryder called it literally 1 in a billion. It matched the parachute Cooper took. Shante McCoy also found her father's skydiving logbook. It showed 9 practice jumps in the months before, both hijackings unusual for someone who already had military jump wings, but McCoy's military training was in static line jumps, where the parachute deploys automatically. For a hijacking, he'd need to pull the ripcord manually. The practice jumps make sense. Gryder posted videos on his YouTube channel detailing the discovery. In September 2023, the FBI contacted him. Agents asked to see the parachute. On September 20, 2023, Gryder and Rick McCoy met FBI agents in Richmond, Virginia. The agents took the parachute, harness, and logbook into evidence. Gryder said the agents were professional and stoic, but clearly taking it seriously. In late 2023, the FBI conducted a search of the McCoy family property in North Carolina. 7 agents spent hours searching the grounds. They found additional evidence, but the FBI has not publicly disclosed what. The FBI has also requested DNA samples from McCoy's children. Rick McCoy said agents have indicated they may exhume Richard's body for direct DNA comparison to the tie left on Flight 305. As of early 2025, the FBI has not announced results. The investigation is ongoing, so let's examine the evidence for and against Richard Floyd McCoy II being D.B. Cooper. Asterisk, evidence FOR. 1. Asterisk, nearly identical hijacking. Asterisk, the methods were almost the same: rear stairs exit, parachute escape, ransom demand. McCoy demonstrated he knew how to execute this specific type of hijacking. 2. Asquast, the parachute. The modified N-body 8 found on McCoy's property matches the unique parachute Cooper took. Is not proof, but it's a remarkable coincidence. 3. Ask, the logbook. Ask, McCoy's practice jumps align with the timeline. He was preparing. 4. Asterisk, military skills. Ask, McCoy was a Green Beret helicopter pilot and demolitions expert. He had the training to pull off a dangerous night jump. 5. Asterisk, the children's belief. Shante was 4 years old in 1972 when her father was arrested for the Utah hijacking. She says she remembers federal agents seizing $500,000 in cash and a parachute from their home. She and her brother believe their father committed both hijackings out of desperation. He was a Vietnam veteran struggling with PTSD and unable to find steady work. Evidence against. 1. Physical description. The single biggest obstacle. Multiple flight attendants described Cooper as mid-40s. McCoy was 29. Witnesses said brown eyes. McCoy had blue. This is hard to explain. 2. Alibi. McCoy's family says he was in Utah for Thanksgiving, but as Gryder points out, if McCoy's wife was complicit, the alibi isn't reliable. 3. Behaviour. Cooper drank and smoked. McCoy didn't. Counter-argument. Cooper used a fake name when buying the ticket. Why wouldn't he use a fake persona drinking and smoking to throw off investigators? 4. DNA. If McCoy's DNA doesn't match the tie, the theory collapses. Results are pending. The FBI is now testing DNA from the tie against samples from McCoy's children. Exhumation may provide a direct comparison. The results will either confirm or eliminate McCoy definitively. But there's one more question that must be answered. Could anyone have survived that jump? For decades, the FBI's position was clear. Cooper almost certainly died. The reasons seemed obvious. Asterisk, the conditions were brutal. Asterisk, Cooper jumped at night into a rainstorm. Visibility was near zero. The forest below were dense old-growth Douglas fir, steep ravines, the Lewis River. Even in daylight, landing safely would be difficult. In darkness, it would be nearly impossible. Ask, the equipment was inadequate. Ask, the parachute Cooper took was a non-steerable military reserve chute. He couldn't control where he landed. The winds at 10,000 feet were estimated at over 200 miles per hour. He would have been blown miles off course. The clothing was wrong. Cooper wore a business suit, dress shirt, thin tie and loafer street shoes. No boots, no gloves, no helmet, no cold weather gear. the temperature at 10,000 feet was below freezing. Even if he survived the landing, hypothermia was a serious risk. He didn't know the reserve was sewn shut. Askarion's jumper would have checked the parachutes. Cooper didn't notice that the reserve he left behind was unusable. This suggests he wasn't a pro. The money. He jumped with $200,000 in a canvas bag tied to his body. The bag weighed 21 pounds. Experienced skydivers say holding onto a 21-pound bag while free-falling and deploying a parachute would be nearly impossible. He likely lost the bag during the jump. FBI agent Ralph Himmelsbach, who led the investigation for years, believed Cooper died. "I don't think he survived," Himmelsbach said. "The jump was suicidal." But others disagree. Dan Gryder, an experienced pilot and skydiver, replicated the jump in 2021 for the 50th anniversary of the hijacking. He jumped from a Boeing 727 at 10,000 feet at night in similar weather conditions, holding a bag weighted to match the ransom. Gryder's conclusion: it was survivable. Difficult, yes, but survivable. Gryder found that holding the money was the hardest part. The bag was almost impossible to control during freefall. He believes Cooper lost the money, which would explain why $5,800 washed up along the Columbia River years later, while Cooper's body was never found. Weather records from November 24, 1971 show the conditions weren't as severe as initially reported. Yes, it was raining. Yes, it was cloudy, but winds were moderate. The temperature at ground level was around 41 degrees cold, but not lethal. If Cooper landed in trees or near the river, he could have survived the night. If McCoy was Cooper, survival becomes more plausible. McCoy was a trained Green Beret. He'd done hundreds of jumps. He knew how to land in difficult terrain. He'd served 2 combat tours in Vietnam. Surviving dangerous conditions was part of his training. The logbook Shante McCoy found shows her father practiced 9 jumps in the months before the Cooper hijacking. These weren't static line military jumps. They were civilian freefall jumps where you pull your own ripcord. McCoy was preparing for exactly this type of jump. If McCoy survived, where did he go? The jump zone was remote but not inaccessible. Interstate 5 was less than 20 miles away. Logging roads crisscrossed the area. If McCoy landed safely, he could have hiked out, reached a road, and driven away. His wife could have picked him up. 5 months later, McCoy hijacked another plane, this time in Utah, demanding $500,000. Was he trying again because he'd lost the Cooper ransom during the jump? The $5,800 that washed up in 1980 suggests the money went into the Columbia River between 1974 and 1979, years after the hijacking. How did it get there? One theory: McCoy buried most of the money somewhere safe, but lost or hid a portion near the river. When the Army Corps dredged the river in 1974, the buried money was disturbed and eventually washed downstream. This theory remains speculative, but it's consistent with the evidence. Today, more than 53 years after D.B. Cooper jumped into the night, the case remains officially unsolved. But it may not remain that way for long. The FBI has the parachute, they have the logbook, they have DNA from the tie, they have DNA samples from Richard McCoy's children. Testing is underway. If the DNA matches, the mystery is solved. Richard Floyd McCoy, the set-in, was D.B. Cooper. If the DNA doesn't match, McCoy is eliminated, and the search continues. But even if McCoy is confirmed, questions remain. Did he survive the jump? Where did he go? What happened to the rest of the money? And why, 5 months later, did he hijack another plane? Some believe McCoy survived the Cooper jump, but lost the money. Desperate for cash, and having proven the method worked, he tried again in Utah. This time, he demanded more money, $500,000 instead of $200,000, and used a better bag with handles. He learned from his mistakes. Others believe Cooper, whoever he was, died in the jump. The $5,800 that washed up in 1980 is all that remains. The rest of the money is buried somewhere in the forests of southwest Washington, along with Cooper's body and parachute. The truth is, we don't know. But this much is certain: D.B. Cooper, whoever he was, pulled off the only unsolved hijacking in American aviation history. He outsmarted the FBI. He vanished without a trace. and for 53 years, his identity remained unknown. In the early 1970s, Cooper became a folk hero. Songs were written about him. Movies dramatized his escape. Some saw him as a Robin Hood figure, a regular guy who beat the system. Others saw him as a dangerous criminal who got lucky. His hijacking led to immediate and permanent changes in aviation security. Metal detectors were installed at airports. Baggage screening became mandatory. Passengers who paid cash for tickets on the day of departure faced additional scrutiny. And every Boeing 727 was fitted with a Cooper vane, a device that prevents the rear air stair from being lowered in flight. The Cooper vane ended the era of skyjacking escapes. In 1972 alone, 15 copycat hijackers attempted similar escapes. All were caught. The method Cooper pioneered no longer works, but the mystery endures. The children of Richard Floyd McCoy believe their father was D.B. Cooper. They waited until their mother died to come forward because they believe she helped him. The parachute found on the family property matches the description of Cooper's chute. The logbook shows McCoy was training for exactly this type of jump. DNA testing will provide the final answer. If McCoy is confirmed as Cooper, the legend changes. D.B. Cooper isn't an unknown folk hero. He's Richard Floyd the Coy II, a decorated Green Beret, a Vietnam veteran, a convicted hijacker who pulled off two of the most daring crimes in American history. He escaped from federal prison in 1974 and was killed in a shootout with FBI agents 3 months later. If McCoy is ruled out, the search continues. The man who called himself Dan Cooper, misreported as DB by a careless journalist, remains unidentified. Either way, one truth is undeniable. On November 24, 1971, a man walked onto a plane, extorted $200,000, jumped into the night, and was never seen again. 53 years later, we're closer to the truth than ever before. But the mystery, America's greatest aviation mystery, is not yet solved.